Something's wrong with American tourism. You've seen the headlines: empty hotels, shuttered attractions, airports full of frustrated travelers, but few of them are heading on vacation. And while MAGA influencers blame it all on wokeness or crime, the real story is a lot more complicated and it hits working people the hardest. Let's unpack why America's once mighty tourist economy is falling apart and who's really paying the price. I mean, let's start with the obvious: Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. Yeah, let's cut the singing here, buddy. There are people. Okay, so if you don't know, Vegas is predominantly owned by two companies. There's one on one side of the strip and there's one on the other, and they own all of it. And then there's other smaller players. But the predominance of Vegas is two people. And one of those major players has been laying people off by the hundreds and hundreds every week over the last couple of months. And they just announced another massive layoff. Now, who are they getting rid of? Well, okay, let's say they're getting rid of people in the kitchen cooking stuff for the buffets. That means that the buffet eating tourists aren't showing up. Well, what if they're getting rid of the doormen and the people that carry baggage and luggage? Well, that means people who aren't showing up for a couple days or a week or more aren't coming. What if they're laying off the valet parking lot attendants? Well, that means the people from surrounding states, California, Texas, who drive to Vegas. That means they ain't coming to have a splash or a weekend where they're impressing their partner and valet parking the car. Um, yeah, all of those people are being laid off. Well, who else? Well, they're laying off concierge staff. Concierge staff is the one that should concern everybody in Vegas because when the concierge staff are let go, that means the whales aren't coming in. They're not spending huge amounts of money, they're not gambling huge amounts of money, and they're just not coming to Vegas. And we can tell you, they are going to other casinos around the world and out on cruise ships too. Those people are seeing traffic the same or uptick, especially outside of the US. Who's suffering is Vegas. And that's what we're going to be talking about today: Vegas and all the other tourist cities around the United States. So there's a great decline in travel. Post pandemic, the travel industry was supposed to bounce back, but instead, many iconic tourist destinations were seeing flat or declining numbers, not just in international visitors, but even from Americans themselves. In New York City, foot traffic in Times Square, it's still down from 2019. Well, I mean, obviously, all the people, they didn't go back to the office. They were at work, but they were working from home. And, once those people aren't coming into the city every day, they're not having conversations like, hey, Anna, do you want to go get a drink after, legal stuff today? Because they're both sitting at home. So, national parks like Yellowstone saw record visits during COVID, ironically, because they could go there because there's space, national parks. But now even those are cooling off. The hidden cost of travel. So, what's changed? Well, the answer is right here in your wallet. The average hotel stay is up over 30% since 2020. Yeah, these hotels have gotten, a lot of them, and we've talked about it before, they've gotten into programs that let them see and regulate their rates compared to others. Also, there's been a major move where hotels, especially new ones, and hotel chains have bought themselves or acquired a spot into things like the Marriott franchise. And the Marriott property umbrella, and there are others, IHG. I mean, there's several of them. But if you think back 20 years ago, Marriott was Marriott, and then it was Courtyard and Fairfield, and then you had the long stay Residence Inn. Like you could know them and you could easily describe them. I mean, that's really 40 years ago, 30 years ago. But then you had like the JW popped up and the Marriott Marquis. And, now when you go look at the Marriott chain, you've got 40 different plus brands there to choose from, a lot of which are identical to others with a minor thing. They're in 8 or 10 different cities, or they're Italian designers, something that makes them who they are. Um, but here's the thing: now that they're part of that chain, they have access to some of that data. And what they're realizing is, you know, It's better for the hotel to have less staff and bring in higher value clients, filling up all those suites and luxury rooms or bringing them in with packages that include dinner or tickets or the breakfast and a show. Ann and I were just at the Marriott Marquis in San Francisco, and part of our resort fee, uh, an add-on, also included, coffee, the concierge breakfast, included tickets to go ride on the famous San Francisco trolley. Those are all things that are captive dollars. And when you go to use those tickets, where do you go? Over to the concierge desk, and they point you to suggestions for where you can go to eat and drink and have a great time. And it all adds to the spend at the hotel and the hotel's associates. All right, let's talk about airfare. Airfare is up 25% year over year. Not in passenger volume, no, in the fare costs. And I mean, I will tell you, we just made several trips through several airports across the country, and we saw things like flights that were canceled. There's the issues with all the flights going into Newark. If the flights to Newark were full and hugely profitable, both with passengers and cargo down in the belly, those airlines would be running them. They'd find some way to get into Newark. They wouldn't cancel a dozen flights every single day of the week. It's because there's no revenue there for it. But what the airlines have also found out is you still need to fly to some places. You can't take a bus, train, or drive, and trains are even more expensive than airfare across the country. But the airlines haven't had to lower their prices because the airlines, while they're selling a commodity, a seat from, A to B, there are only so many seats. And then don't even talk about the cost of car rentals. Car rentals have gotten outrageous. They've blamed lots of things like we've upgraded our fleet. They held off on upgrades during the pandemic and then they made a huge investment into things like EVs. Well, those EVs, they're getting used not by tourists, they're getting used by, ride share people who are going and I mean, I've done it myself. I've recommended it years ago. If you had a business and you were going to be driving, 50, 100, 200 miles every day, don't use your own car. Go get a rental car, expense the entire amount of the rental, and then all the maintenance, wear, and tear is handed back to the rental car company and it never impacts your personal car. Well, but I have a car sitting here at home. It's perfectly reasonable to drive. Yes, if you're not savvy. See, the savvy person and the unsavvy person 40 years ago, very different than everybody today. Because everybody today in their phone right there in their hand has access to information that tells them, hey, how many miles are you driving? You should not be using your own car. And that calculus is readily available. It was not decades ago. And all of that, the pandemic, the decline, the volume, tourists, the EVs, the mistakes with the EVs where, a lot of consumers don't want an EV because, they're not driving back and forth 10-mile trips. They're getting a rental car and driving 200 miles and then they're coming back and they don't know how they're going to charge their car out there at, the family farm because they're there for a barbecue or a party, some family event. So they don't want to take the chance. And all of that's contributing to, not cheaper prices. Ad and I just rented a car in Miami to drive from Miami up to Orlando. And our time to wait for that car was 2 hours. And it wasn't because things were slow, it's because there was that much of a line. There was this huge demand of people who wanted cars. And, when there's a line at the door like that, the rental car company is not giving out $9 deals. They're raising the prices as much as they can. The other thing that rental car companies, if you've rented recently, have started doing is that same nonsense that hotels have done, which is the non refundable, you don't get your money back, we're going to lock you into a fee price that looks like a deal. And they've also started the here's our 12 different options for vehicles. And, it gets real tempting. You're on vacation, you're driving down the Florida coast, you're driving to Miami Beach, you're driving to California. You want to put the top down and enjoy the sun. And, you don't realize that, you just spent $200 extra for a convertible for every day that you're renting it for a week. Because you're having fun. It's part of the cost. And the rental car companies have also realized that it's better to have you and that one car out there for the extra profit than it is to have 10 people with a car, because there's also a problem with the rental car companies getting rid of the cars. We're in a state of the economy with vehicles and costs to buy a car, and especially on new cars and resale. For people with interest rates, that there's not this. Price of cars have gone up skyrocketed, and that's impacted the price of rentals, but also the price of getting rid of them. They go out and buy $100,000 car and burn 30, 40,000 miles on it in a year. It's not going to sell very well in the resale marketplace. And who eats that is the rental car company. And the way they eat it is they charge you for it in your rental every day. And all of that has increased the cost of hotels, airfare, and those rental cars. And travel's become a luxury again. Families that used to budget for a summer vacation, they're just now trying to cover groceries and rent. The concept that somebody is like, oh no, absolutely, we're taking our vacation now, and we're taking a Christmas vacation, and we're going to be driving out to grandmom's for Thanksgiving for a week, so we're trying to figure out when the kids are done school, and you know our kids go to a religious school, so spring break, Easter break gives us an extra week. Plus I got my laptop, I can work remote. All of those things should contribute to a huge boom in travel. The problem is people have to be able to afford it. And when you have people trying to cover their groceries and their rent, that travel disappears. It doesn't get pushed down the list. It disappears. State hype and the reality. So MAGA influencers love to say red states are booming, booming with tourists. But the numbers tell us a really different story. Let's take Florida's Governor DeSantis. He claimed record breaking tourism in 2023, except those numbers excluded, for some convenient reason, international tourists, who are way down. And when you subtract people coming for work conferences and family obligations, there's not much left. See, it's all part of a trend, cherry pick statistics, blaming wokeness, ignoring actual economics. You know, let's talk about somebody flying. Okay, largest airport in the United States by a huge number, over 100 million people go through Atlanta. Now, how many of those people go through Atlanta because all the flights from Florida go to Atlanta, and then from Atlanta they fly somewhere else? Well, they're not a Georgia tourists, but they get counted by some people. And then you've got people who are flying from, you know, Charlotte through Atlanta because they're going over to Alabama for a family reunion. They get counted. I mean, they need to fly through Atlanta because they're taking two different puddle jumper flights. There's lots of ways that you could look at the numbers and go, Atlanta, 105 million people this year, booming. Yeah, but how many of them came in and hopped out another flight and got counted twice? And the only thing they did besides use the bathroom was maybe buy themselves a bottle of water. That's not really a good tourist, especially not when you've got a hotel at the airport that has empty rooms. Those numbers are all way down. And then we've got, well, okay, then we've got convention people. Now, if you're a business and you're having a convention, I've been to a lot of these. The I've been impacted by issues with Microsoft many, many years ago, and the Department of Justice, where I was stuck in New Orleans for almost 2 months for a training, a convention, another training, and then a trade show. I mean, I went home for a couple days, had to come back, and then there was another horrible. Let me tell you, New Orleans is a wonderful place for a couple days. When you're there for week on week, it is. It is just horrible because you live by the beignet rule. What time do the beignets start cooking at Cafe Du Monde? And then you're there for it. And then it's like, okay, well, I got to go to the convention, and then I'll get breakfast and coffee and I'll sleep in my chair. And when everybody starts to move, my buddies will wake me and take me to the next event. And then I'll be at the event and I might drown out or woke back up. that's, that's who you are. And then at night, you're either crashing or you're catching up on your work and study for the next day's assignment, or the customer that's back home that you're ignoring while you're at the convention has stuff for you to do. Um, all of that contributes to you might have a couple days where you're out there, you know, at the crack of dawn on the Mississippi and the beignets, but then you wind up with you just can't sustain it, and then you become a convention visitor, but you're a working convention visitor who just doesn't contribute to the local tourist events because you run out of steam. You know, how many hurricanes you chugging down there, buddy? It gets rough. And again, it's all part of a trend. You know, whether you're traveling for work or family obligations or just traveling in and then switching flights and traveling back out, unless you are a real tourist, somebody who flies in, gets out of the airport, gets a rental car, goes to the hotel, goes to exhibits, eats out, goes to see museums, or is there to watch the Phillies play the Atlanta Braves for 3 days and then flies back home because you're a huge baseball fan. That's tourist. When we think about a tourist, you don't contribute those are the people who contribute to the local economy. And when somebody takes numbers and they, pull out all the other pieces and they just give you a comparison of, oh, tourism is up because look at what we've got here from, locals. But the international people are gone. International person's going to spend way more. Who does tourism actually serve? Well, the truth is, American tourism, it's not designed for working families anymore. It's designed for the ultra wealthy and global elites. Private airport lounges. Oh my God. Anna's not here next to me, so I can say this. $1,000 Disney passes. Exclusive resorts in Aspen, all growing. Meanwhile, the family road trip's becoming a thing of the past. And workers in the tourism industry, they're still underpaid, still underprotected, and first to get laid off when bookings fall. The tourism industry caters to the wealthy, and it does that on the back of the working class. And those are people who are just never going to enjoy the benefits of that same level of experience. And while your MAGA friend might scream about cruise ships not hiring Americans, uh, they're treated no different, once you step back. And I just spent an hour on hold for Halloween tickets at Disney. And separate from the songs that just never end that you hear over and over again, in there was a message that said, "Hey, do you not want to wait in line with the riffraff? We've got a thing for you. Just pay extra money and you'll skip all the lines. And you'll skip the riffraff. We'll take you. Matter of fact, we will let you hire a Disney person who will walk you to the front of the line." Wow. Yeah. No, it is very different from the, everybody going to Walt's place and walking around for a few hours. It's a big business, and that's who pays the bills. The international angle on tourism cannot be ignored. International tourism to the U.S. is down. Why? It's why it's down. First off, visa delays. There's visa delays, the cost of getting a visa, the uncertainty of it, and then the reputation. You've got a visa. Is that a guaranteed ticket that your European family is coming right through the line into the United States? Absolutely not. And then you've got expensive airfare to bring you over here. And then, let's be honest, that reputation problem, many foreigners, it's not just small numbers, it's many foreigners don't feel welcome in the United States of America. That's not a left or right issue, it's a branding crisis, and it's costing the US billions in lost revenue all across every aspect of the tourist industry. Is it possible to rebuild the US tourist industry to create a better travel economy? I mean, what if we rethought tourism altogether from the ground up? Instead of chasing mega developments and resort towns, we could invest in local tourism, public transportation, affordable lodging. I mean, holy cow, public transportation. There is a very much European and Asian concept that says when the wealthy want to use public transportation will thrive. And the more public transportation thrives, the beautiful it looks to tourists coming into town because they can fly in and then they can get a train to take them out to the city center and get their hotel. And then from there, they can go see tours and see history or, go out and see a lovely view and a lovely meal. All the things that encourage tourists to come to your city. Right here in New Jersey, there's a New Jersey transit strike going on. Part of the ugliness of it is the transit workers have been working without a contract for years, years. The current New Jersey governor is at the end of his second term. Like, what the hell, pal? People couldn't get a contract during his entire term, but now he's going to sit down and meet with them. Nothing's going to happen. And the worst part is, it looks bad for everybody. And then you've got the internet. I mean, I can go Google, a train video about how to take a train. Like we have a trip coming up for a cruise out of Barcelona. And, my comment to Anna was, well, we're going to fly into France. No, 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 even better. Let's fly into Heathrow. And then we'll take the channel to France. Well, Belgium and then France. But we'll take the channel. And then from there, she could spend a day over there at, Paris Disney, Mickey Paris, whatever it's called, Disneyland Paris. Somebody in the comments correct me. Because then I'll know you made it this far in the video. That would be really awesome. And then we can take a train down to Barcelona and then catch the cruise ship. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that we can take those trips across Europe. The European transit system connects all major cities and hubs all over the place. Heck, if I wanted to, every one of those stops, I would tell her, let's just go back to our home country of Vilnius, Lithuania. And then from there, we'll take a train from Vilnius back out. Because we just want to keep spending a couple days getting ourselves pink soup back and forth. We can do it. It's not difficult to do. Now, can you do the same thing in the United States? Let's say you were flying into Newark with all of its problems, and now from Newark you want to get to your hotel in New York City. How are you doing it? Well, there's an Amtrak train you could take. That's pretty expensive. Well, what about if I take a local train? That's pretty dumpy. It's just there's just not a love or concern to have public transit in the United States. And when you tell someone who comes from a foreign country that, yeah, you're going to have a really difficult time with public transportation here, that that does not encourage them to come here. And then you've got small towns. There used to be a thing called Main Street, and let's face it, it's your fault, it's my fault. If you've ever shopped at Walmart, Target, any big box store, you killed the Main Street stores. But also, let's remember, the Main Street stores killed themselves. I mean, how often did you want to go in there and find out that everything you wanted wasn't available? You had to order it, wait for it to show up, and then, you might as well be a cowboy in the Old West pulling out the catalog on the counter saying, I need one of these from Sears. And they're like, it'll be on a train in 2 months. You know, People don't want that. They want the instant gratification. That leads itself to the giant department stores and that leads itself to the giant warehouses. And then that just kills the main streets. And once they're gone, they don't come back. U.S. national parks. Now, we just came from Alaska. We can tell you that the Park Service is in operation. But I will also tell you that there's a video coming out about it where we talk about our you know, on the down low conversations with the Rangers because they're in a very tough situation. Just a few weeks ago, they were all going to be gone, and now they have jobs. They're not going to publicly badmouth or say things, and the other problem is a lot of them voted for Trump. So they are FAFO in it. They're standing there with jobs on a very thin line, keeping them going. Um, and then we've got cultural events that bring in tourists. You know, if you have a cultural event that brings in visitors and it prices the locals out, the locals aren't going to support your event. with things like, building a new park or building a new bridge or passing a bond referendum. They're going to argue and fight against it. Not too long ago, people wanted stadiums for sports teams. They wanted, venues for concerts. They wanted these big venues for the Olympics and for World Cup not too long ago. And then very quickly, people with those things in their hands found out, wait, I can search. These things suck. They're bad for local towns. They're horrible for business. They don't generate lots of revenue. They create very few jobs. And then once the event is gone, it just creates a giant white elephant that does nothing for the city. And then arguments over who maintains it, who's going to take care of it. It's just it's a short-term little gain and a long-term hard, difficult pain in the ass. And people are learning. Don't do it. And it's the phrase, "Why are we building a stadium for billionaires?" is very, very repeated all across America because people have found out the truth. You know. So we're talking about travel, and one of the most important ways that we can wrap this up is to ask the question, who gets left behind? It's not just the family pet. It's not. Tourism collapsing all around us. It doesn't just mean fewer vacations. It means more job losses. That's what's getting left behind. That job at the hotel for those concierges and valets and parking lots, once those are gone, they're not coming back. They're not coming back anytime soon, and they're not going to come back in numbers. And even worse, they're not going to come back with better pay. They're not going to come back with better benefits. So it's going to be, if it ever comes back, it's going to be just as bad or an even worse job. And no one's going to want it. So now that contributes to, small town shrinking. Once you lose enough people, at your little rest stop hotel on the side of the interstate, it can't come back. It's just gone. And then you've got these even deeper divides that occur between the ultra wealthy and the rest of us. There's way more of us, but if us can't afford to eat and pay their medical bills, and their car has a problem, or their heater or air conditioner has a problem, and they're worried about all of that, they are not picking up. I was just about to say they're not picking up a travel brochure, but those things ain't around anymore. They're not picking up their cell phone or going to their browser and Googling, how do I go on a trip? If we want to fix the travel economy, we can't keep treating it like a luxury for the rich. We have to build it for the people who actually need a break. And the question you have to ask is, where are those people going to go? Because if you can take a really cool vacation for a week from New York, Philadelphia, LA, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, uh, Las Vegas, Seattle, Portland, San Francisco. I mention all these places because they're all suffering horribly from a lack of tourism right now. And they're suffering from a tightening of the purse strings of the tourists that do show up. If somebody that lives there can't easily go spend a weekend or a week away on vacation somewhere, um, then they're just not going to do it. And it just collapses the whole system down. And I will remind you of a famous TED talk. Somebody who is very wealthy can only buy so many flat panel TVs. But if all the people in your factory are given a decent wage, they could all buy a couple of them for their homes. And you will sell way more flat panel TVs than the rich person will ever buy. You just have to spread the love around. If you've taken around this long, please post a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your opinion is on things. And if you'd like, please join the community. You can click subscribe, boop the bell so you're reminded next time we put a video out. You can click the join button if you want to become a member. We've got some pretty cool titles in there for people who want to support what we're doing here. And keep your eye out for a lot more videos. And as you've seen over the last couple days with the events going on, there's always something going on, whether we publish it as a long or a short. So be sure to check out what we're doing. Lastly, for those of you who've been yelling at me saying, "Where the hell are the on this day videos?" Hey man, I was in Alaska. I tried to queue a few of them up before we left. It didn't work out. And then I tried to make a few of them while I was there, and there were times where I could barely get any videos out. So I'd like to do better. And I guess what I need you to post in the comments is, do you want me to go back to the days that I missed and get those out there and then keep working forward? Because I'd love to hear your opinion. Portside Politics, we're here for all sides of the argument, and we don't really want to have an argument. We want to have a conversation. So please join the community, post in the comments. Thank you so much.